So I wanted to go over the comparable interface that is gone over in the book. There's two major points in the book. The first point is implementing the comparable interface, and that's just the standard way to compare two objects. Right? You implement comparable, that forces you to implement compare to, and then once you have that set up, then you could say object 1 dot compare to object 2, and it will give you a negative, positive, or a 0 return value. And then there's a second portion in the book where it talks about comparator, implementing the comparator interface. And so it might be a bit confusing, so I want to go over it generally so that it might make a little bit more sense to you as you go through and recorrect your exercises. So there's a slight difference here. Let's go over first the comparable interface. All right. So what do we have? We have a bank account class that implements comparable. And that's all you need to do. And comparable just has one method. All it has is compare to. And there are just a couple of rules here. The rules for compare to is if object A is less than object B, you are returning a -1 or a negative value. And then if A is greater than B, object A is greater than B, then you're going to return a positive value. And if A is equal to B, then you're going to return a 0 value. So that's what compare to does, and we need to implement that. Of course, it's going to take in an object, and it could be any kind of an object, right? So we're going to typecast the parameter as an object, and it's going to come on in. We're going to set it as the incoming object as a type bank account, because that's what this class is going to be comparing. And once we have that, we implement this algorithm here, right? Comparing whatever it is you want to compare with regard to bank account. So whether that's the balance, whether that's the savings balance, the checking balance, the account number, the date that the object was created, whatever it is you want to compare, you're going to go ahead and implement that. So what this does here is it implements the balance, right? So if one balance is greater than the other, then it returns a positive number, and then if the first balance is less than the incoming balance, then you are returning a -1 and a 0 if they're equal. Okay, great. So then now we're over here in our tester where we're going to be using our bank account classes, our bank account class, and we're going to be creating a set of objects that we put into an array, 0 to 4. And then we're going to do this, right? System.println, and what are we going to compare? We're going to compare bank account 0 to bank account 1. And you can see here that they're going downward, right? So this one is A to E, and then the second argument is the bank account balance, which goes from 10 down to 2. So if we're comparing bank account 0 with bank account 1, well then 0 is greater than 1. So our compare to is going to return a +1. All right, and that's what should happen here. So let's go ahead and run that. And that's what it does, +1, right? So that's what compare to allows you, implementing the comparable interface allows you to do, right? So if you ever need to compare objects and sort a list or do anything like that, you could just go back to the class, implement comparable, define the compare to method, and you can compare objects, right, of the same class. So now let's go ahead and go through comparator. Okay, so for comparator, the situation is that this bank account class is not visible. Okay, for whatever reason. There's a couple of different reasons, but it's kind of out of the scope of what we're talking about. But maybe a good example would be going back to Pygame. We had the entity class, right, where we created objects. So maybe you created an entity object, and now you wanted to compare the entity object based on their energy level. Right, well, what can you do? Well, you can dive into Pygame, look for the right file that defines the entity class, and implement comparable. And then that would allow you to back into your main program, you can compare the two entity objects or the set of entity objects. But what if you don't want to go and search for it, right? Or what if it's hidden? What if it's protected? What if it's private, right? You don't have access to it. So what you can do is you can say, okay, well, I don't know where entity is. but I've imported the library, so I know I have access to the class. Um, so let's go ahead and use the comparator interface. So how is that going to work? Again, bank account is hidden. We don't know about it. We don't know how to touch it. So all you need to do is we know that it's called bank account. So we created a new class called BA underscore comparator. It doesn't have to be called BA underscore comparator. It can be called whatever you want. All right, so we go ahead and do that. Create the new class. I want to go ahead and paste in code. And if you look here, what did I do? Well, we import, Java utility.star. And the the BA comparator class is going to implement comparator. And comparator doesn't have the compare to object. It has the compare to method. It has the compare method. Okay, so there we go. We have the compare method, and we're going to take in two objects, and we're going to typecast them as type object. We know that this BA comparator is going to compare two bank account objects. Okay, so then we take in the first object, typecast it as bank account, set it into BA1, typecast the second object as bank account, and set it into BA2. We implement the same algorithm. If it's greater than, if it's less than, or if it's equal to, we'll return a 0, and you return the value. So assuming we have that in place, what can we do here in our main? What we can do, let me go ahead and lock that out, comment that out. Well, we need to, first of all, comparator comp. So create a comparator object, and you're going to say new BA underscore comparator. Okay. So what you need to do is you need to make a comparator type object, call it comp, make it a type BA comparator, that class that we just made. And now that we have that, all you need to do is take your array. You could say dot sort, and you can sort that array by having the first argument be the array, the bank account array, and the second argument be the comparator object. And so if you run this, it's going to run through the array, sorting them based on their bank account values, right? So to prove that this kind of works correctly, what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to run through the array, printing out all of the objects, and it should be printing them out from 10 down to 2 with the names A down to E. Then I'm going to create the comparator object, sort the array using the comparator object, and then print out the array again. So let's go ahead and run that. I'll compile, and I will run the main. And that's what it does, right? So here we go. Here's the first run through. It prints out the A down to E. Then we sort, and then we print out again. And since it sorts based on bank account balance, it prints out E down to A, right? So 2 up down to 10. So that is how you can use the comparator interface to help you when you don't have access to the bank account class. Okay. So yeah, pretty straightforward, although it could be confusing when you first take a look at it. Yeah, and so hopefully that helps.